Hello and welcome to All the Way Down, a YouTube channel all about the Scottish rock band Biffy Clyro.
All the way down, all the way down.
So it's the 25th of February 2022 and I've just downloaded the documentary Biffy Clyro, Cultural Sons of Scotland. It's on Amazon Prime Video. Never had Amazon Prime Video before. Just got it yesterday for the 30-day free trial. I'll see how I get on with it, whether I continue, probably just cancel it once I've watched this a few times. I'm really excited about this, and I was just thinking, I was just walking the dogs then, and just thinking about why I'm actually really excited to see it. The trailer said it was the sort of articles that I've read about it so far say it's unprecedented behind the scenes footage of the band, and I don't think we've seen much behind the scenes stuff of this band. I'm just trying to think of, whilst I was walking, trying to think of all the times we've seen that kind of footage before. And I do remember going back to Infinity Land, every single had a DVD that comes with the single. So My Recovery Injection, Glitter and Trauma, Only One Word Comes to Mind, had like a DVD with the music video on it. And I think there was about 5 or 6 minutes worth of footage of touring, being backstage, working on a few different things. I think it was recorded by Neil, the tour manager, but it wasn't very detailed. It was quite rough, and it just gave you a little bit of a flavour of what was going on back then. It looked like it was put together in Windows Media Player or something like that. When they worked with Garth Richardson for those 3 albums in Los Angeles, the Sentimental music video was a compilation really of behind the scenes stuff, what they were working on, you know, messing about when they weren't recording, bits of them recording in the studio, but nothing too big. This is kind of the biggest thing, really. And from what I know, it is recording their last album, The Myth of the Happily Ever After. As we know, they've been in this country, in the UK, they've been in America recording a few albums. And I think this is the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, that they've recorded an album in their own country. So this is a 66-minute documentary, Cultural Sons of Scotland. I think maybe a bit about lockdown, about recording in their own country, in Ayrshire, in a recording studio they've put together themselves. And it's Amazon Prime Video as well. It's a big deal. I'm maybe going to pause it a couple of times whilst it's going on, if anything comes to me, or I might just watch the entire thing with my big bag of Maltesers and my glass of cordial, because I'm a rock and roll star. Okay, I've just had to pause it. It's just maybe a minute or so. So it's done a big introduction. And the biggest thing that's come out of it is Ben's actually confirmed where the name comes from. I want to do a video on all the different rumours and all the different reasons why the band have said what Biffy Clyro stands for. And he said that it stands for that line of big imagination, blah, 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 which I'll put on the screen. But to say it in an official documentary like this is pretty big news. It's always been in little interviews they've done with maybe rock magazines and stuff like that, and little bits here and there. And there's been different reasons that they've given, maybe for their own amusement, but to say it in a big documentary like this, maybe that's the real name, the real reason why the band name exists. So as we know, on the week of releasing Celebration of Endings, they did this live from Glasgow Barrowlands Ballroom show, which I covered on another video. It's absolutely fantastic show. Played the whole album from start to finish, used different parts of the room, even Sai went outside at one point. And I'd not really heard their comments on this side of it, but it really struck me how important this show was to them, because I think Sai said something like, if it wasn't for this show, they wouldn't have fully realised that they'd put out an album. And I forgot that the album went to #1. Just imagine how big the band would have been if it wasn't for lockdown, if they were out touring and had that proper cycle. But they came up with this live show that was recorded absolutely brilliantly. Do watch the video on that. And that kind of kicked off what was the sort of cycle of a Celebration of Endings, which didn't really go that far, because we got the Myth of Happily Ever After quite soon after it. But yeah, it's really setting the precedent now of how lockdown hit them. This is a real example of what they did with that energy and that creativity. It was channeled in the right way. So they've now pitched up at the farm in Ayrshire. This is somewhere they've been for about 15 years, according to the band. The rehearsal space, this is what they're using as the recording studio. And they've built it themselves, including the kitchen. And I do remember if you got the Infinity Land CD, you open up the sort of inlay cover. It was a shot of the rehearsal space. It was the drums, guitar and bass on the floor. And I remember Si's guitar had maybe a tiger print guitar strap, like a furry thing, which I always thought was really cool. So they're in there with a new producer, and they've just introduced Churd, who is Si's guitar tech. And I do remember him when I went to watch them at Manchester Academy years ago. He was loading up the van after the show, and I remember he had an ocean-sized tattoo on his leg, I think. I'm sure it was him. He looked very similar. He's the one who's created these guitar pedals, these new guitar pedals for Si, which you can still buy, the Boom, Blast and Ruin. So the producer for The Myth of the Happily Ever After is apparently Adam Noble. Never heard of him before, and apparently he's produced with the likes of Placebo and Liam Gallagher. And just up to the bit where Si is playing violin on this album. I always knew he could play violin, and that was the first instrument he learned. Apparently it helps him with his sort of the movement in his fingers of working the fretboard. It's just really good to see something as simple as working out a song and adding little bits to it, and how they communicate amongst the three of them. Like I said at the beginning, not really seen much of this. Just three of them in a room working on it and trying to improve it. They're so close. I mean, I know Ben and James are brothers, so that's good. They're going to be close by default, but you can just really tell that they have such a close relationship. Got to say as well, a beautiful array of jumpers on show here. Look at them Access All Area stickers. You have to watch this only for the very extremely rare pictures of like the first couple of gigs. Si's got bleach blonde hair and wearing I think Italian football shirts when they're playing in pubs in Kilmarnock in the very early days. Never seen them before. They must be from family archives. Brilliant. I don't think I'll ever get tired of old footage of them playing Now the Action's on Fire. Every time I see a clip of them playing that song live, you know it's the last song they're playing on the set list, and they just got absolutely wild. So they've talked about a few songs so far on the new album. Dum Dum, A Hunger in Your Heart, and they've just talked about my favourite song from the album, Errors in the History of God. I don't think they're focusing on all songs on the album. I think they're just picking a few out because I'm sure there's a song before Errors in the History of God. There's the keyboard sound on Separate Missions, Put Your Teeth on It as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Storm Thorgerson, R.I.P. Witch's Cup's got to be up there with one of the best songs on the album. That and Errors in the History of God. Something so joyous about watching a band in the same room recording vocals together. So from what I can work out, James drives a BMW, Ben drives an Audi, and Si drives a Tesla and a Porsche, a bright red one. So it's just finished. Really enjoyed that. A lot of old footage they haven't seen before. Not sure where it come from, but it is a documentary really shaped by lockdown and the kind of reaction to that. In terms of it being unprecedented footage, I'm not entirely sure that's accurate. Like I said, there is a lot of footage from long ago, stuff that I don't think anyone's seen, particularly from the first couple of gigs in Kilmarnock and that sort of area. But when they're in the studio, I think a documentary just based on that would have been enough, because I love, and it doesn't really matter what the music is, I love behind the scenes stuff of creating music in the studio, that sort of really energetic recording process, and that really the creative environment I really like seeing. And I'll watch any documentary. It doesn't matter if it's rock music. I remember watching a Take That when they were recording when Robbie Williams first got back with the band. I just found it fascinating, that sort of communication between all three of them, or four of them in Take That's case. Or was there five? The thing that really comes through in this documentary is the fact that they are so close. And yeah, there is brothers in the band, twin brothers in the band. Si says it a lot of times in this documentary. You know, if you're not friends, if you don't have that relationship, then there's no point doing this. So that was me having a look at the Amazon Prime Video documentary Cultural Sons of Scotland that was released in February 2022. Extra special for me really, because when I saw the title of the documentary, Cultural Sons of Scotland, I thought brilliant because it's named after one of my, well, not the title, but a lyric in one of my favourite B-sides, Creative Burns. If you've not listened to that song, do check it out. So the bulk of the documentary is them recording their 9th album, The Myth of the Happily Ever After, which was released in 2021. The main thing that I think you get from it is that there's seemingly no pressure to record this. They've obviously recorded around the UK in the early years, and then when it got to Only Revolutions and Opposites and Ellipsis, they were in LA working with different producers, including Garth Richardson. And this seems to be like there's no pressure, like they're doing it off their own back, which is fantastic. Let's bear in mind that the last album, Celebration of Endings, got to #1 in this country. It was a #1 selling album. So you would have thought that there'd be pressure from Warner's 14th Floor to do a good follow-up on that. But they're in their own studio, a hand-built studio that is their recording space in Ayrshire on a farm. And they're essentially doing it all themselves with producer Adam Noble. They've built the kitchen on their own, they've put everything in together, and they're just spending time together in these rooms, putting together their 9th album. The album got to #4, so pretty good. You know, top 5. You know, it's not #1, but it's still very good chart positioning. It doesn't focus on every song. I've watched it a few times now, and you know, in being distracted by other things, phone, dogs running about the place, you see like the song title come up on the screen, and I don't think you see every song title. And I think if it was a bit more balanced, you maybe would have seen a couple of minutes focusing on each song. But I think they focus on maybe 7 or 8. You do hear every song in clips, but it doesn't focus on each song specifically. So you don't hear about certain lyrics and working on different parts of the song in terms of instruments. But you get to see a hell of a lot of footage about the early years. They go back to where the old pub used to be, where they first played in Kilmarnock, and then they go focusing on a bit of touring, doing their own way, not really worrying about what other people think of them. Then, of course, building up to closer to now in terms of the lockdown, where they were at the time recording Ellipsis in LA. And then their reaction to lockdown, what do they do with that time? You know, they've been on the road working for so long. What happens when they just stop? And of course, Si did his Facebook Lives, his acoustic little shows, which went very well. They had a Celebration of Endings in the pocket. They had to put back the release date. They had to cancel the tour. But they did eventually put it out. And then we get the Barrowlands Ballroom show that came out of that, which is probably the best thing they've done for a while. And then after the Barrowlands gig and after a Celebration of Endings was recorded, in the documentary we hear that Si just started writing again, and that's where we're up to with this documentary. They go to the rehearsal space, they turn it into a recording studio, and they just get to work. There's a really big DIY feel. They're just sort of feeling around in the dark really to make the songs good. And it kind of reminds me of, it really does feel like a band in the first couple of years of recording, finding out what you do when you record, and finding different sounds on the keyboard and working on different songs and trying new ideas. And then of course when the album is recorded, they play the big Glasgow on the Green show, which is like this big, you know, celebration of finally getting out. It reminded me a little bit of not entirely detailed as the Beatles Get Back, but if you've seen that documentary, it is a month in January in the 60s where they are recording, and then they do a gig right at the end on the roof of Apple Music. Couple of things I found really great about this documentary is that the band name clarification. Ben actually says early on, like I said in the main bulk, they do actually confirm where the band name comes from. Now, I don't know why he would choose to make up that, because it is something that they said before in interviews, but they've also given other reasons as to why the band is called Biffy Clyro. So it's funny they would choose this one for an Amazon Prime Video documentary. Maybe that is the real reason why the band name exists. And of course they actually turned down a record deal based on their name because they wouldn't change it. I mean, if that's evidence that they're a band so stubborn and just want to keep to their own thing and do their own thing and wait for, you know, the fan base to come to them, I mean, that's more evidence. That's all the evidence that you need. And probably the best thing that's coming out of this documentary, alongside the flash cars that Simon drives, is the early years and the rare pictures that you see. That, I mean, I've been a mad fan since 2003. I've never seen those pictures before, and they've obviously come from family members, you know, aunties and uncles, mums and dads who've been to these early shows when they're in, you know, ties and waistcoats, and Si's wearing football shirts. I mean, never seen them before, and it's great that they've waited for this official documentary to show those. So to sum up, I really enjoyed the documentary. I think it's something that we've been waiting for a while. It's a shame that because of lockdown and all these restrictions, that it's come to this point in the band's timeline to get something like this. But they've come back to the hometown, the first time ever recording in their own country, recording an album. And I think really it's a perfect time for a documentary to come out like this, where they are a bit naturally reflective. It's probably the longest time they've ever spent in the hometown, in their own country, so why not spend that time recording a new album in the most DIY way you can, and just reflect on this journey that they've been on. My only slight criticism with this documentary is that the balance of focusing on every song could have been a bit better. It just seems like a bit of a rough guide to the album, and I think if it was a documentary just solely on the album, a documentary just solely on lockdown, and a documentary just solely on the journey so far, the early years building up, you know, gaining that momentum, gaining that fan base, it seems to be all those things put into one. I think the only thing that sort of comes out a little bit lacking is the fact that not every song on this new album is kind of looked at in the same amount. And I think if Slurpy Slurpy Sleep Sleep got the same footage as Hunger in Your Haunt, then it would give a much better balance, I think, and a more rounded view of the album as a whole. So all three of them together in a room recording, it really shows the chemistry of the band, the relationship, how well they get on with each other, how much they love each other, and something as simple as that, I think, is worth a documentary in its own right. So those are my thoughts on the 2022 documentary Cultural Sons of Scotland by Biffy Clyro. It's on Amazon Prime Video, so I do urge you to check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. How did you find the documentary? And I'll see you on the next video.